The Dallas Cowboys will have a top 10 defense this year. That and more bold predictions next.
You are Locked On Cowboys, your daily Dallas Cowboys podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. I am your host, Marcus Mosher. You can follow me on Twitter at Marcus_Mosher. And joining me today, as always, is Landon McCool. You can follow him on Twitter at McCoolBCB. And on today's show, we've got three bold predictions for you, including who the Cowboys' leading running back will be this year. Could they potentially have two 1,000-yard receivers? But Landon, the floor is yours. What is your first bold prediction?
Yeah, I think the Cowboys might have a top 10 defense this year. I mean, I certainly think that a lot of things might have to break the right way. But if you look at the Cowboys defense, despite, being absolutely near the very bottom and bottom three in several run defense categories, there was certain aspects of the Cowboys defense that was pretty good as far as pass rushing and pass defense when they had healthy folks. And then it kind of all fell apart once they got major injuries at specifically the cornerback and defensive end position. But if they're able to stay healthy, they do have components. They do have pieces at some key positions that they've been able to hold over. And if, Eberflus can kind of paper over some of the run defensive stuff just by making the personnel play a more defensive-minded system, I think that could put offenses in a kind of precarious position, and the Cowboys defense could kind of unleash some of the superstars that have felt like they've been sidelined by teams that are able to just run all over the Cowboys' run defense.
Yeah, part of me just believes as long as Micah Parsons is healthy and on the field, that you're not going to have a bad defense. And I think we saw that last year, like in the second half of the year, once Micah got back on the field, this was a much better unit. Yes, they had their games where they struggled, the Philadelphia game, the Houston game, but we saw them play really well against Tampa Bay and Cincinnati, two of the best offenses in the league. I think your defense's ceiling and floor is going to be dependent on the players around Micah, but I think the talent is probably better now than it was later in the year. I think the question is, when can they get back Trayvon Diggs and DeMarvion Overshown? And will the young guys be able to step up? Because I do think they have the ability to have a pretty good defense.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of our conversations have been kind of focused on when some of these talented guys would be back early in the season. And we haven't really taken a longer view of the fact that even though the depth isn't going to show up right away, by the end of the season, the Cowboys should have some really nice depth at the cornerback position if you consider all the pieces that they've accumulated, all the names that are on this roster. So, and that kind of depth is really, really important for good defenses. And again, the prediction isn't a top 5 defense. I understand like how far a distance that I even suggesting a top 10 defense is, but I think the biggest thing you have to have is the personnel. And I think outside of a few key spots that they're getting healthier at, they've got really good personnel at the spots that really matter on a defense.
I agree. I think they have a couple of spots at like defensive tackle where, let's say Solomon Thomas can just be, a good backup. I think you feel much better about your defensive line. If Mosher and Landon takes a step, if Sam Williams gets back to the way that he was playing in 2023 before the injury, like there's just a lot of X factors here where if one or two of these players break out or get back to the level that we've seen them play before, it's not hard to squint and see how this can be an elite unit.
Yeah, and I think that, there's times when you are hoping against hope, with some of these situations. Like I would say that, Sam Williams is the most of the hoping against hope of those situations because he's coming off of an ACL. But I don't think it's at all unrealistic to think Nealon takes a jump in year 2. Or that Ezraku can give you at least something as a pass rusher year 1 just because of the maturity of his game coming in. I think that these are all like they have a lot of positive situations that you feel like are trajecting in the correct direction that could be hitting this year. So I think there's a good chance that a couple of those guys hit instead of just one. And suddenly you've really, really got something in a pass rushing unit. You've got depth in the pass defense unit. And if, again, all they need is one more kind of big, we've talked about this a lot, but all they need is kind of one more big body in the run defense for you to convince me that they have the personnel that they need to be a decent run defense. And if they can just be that, a decent run defense team, I think that they've got the personnel to be a very good pass defense team.
I also think they have a very good defensive coordinator in Matt Eberflus. It's just how long does it take him to install his defense? I would assume the transition from Dan Quinn to Mike Zimmer was a pretty tough one, because you're having a completely different style of defense. It's way more complex. Whereas Matt Eberflus's defense, they don't blitz as much. It's a little bit more simple. I would expect this unit to get off to a faster start than what we saw last year's defense.
Yeah, I think it'll be unit specific, right? Because I think, I wonder, I think the defensive line stuff is probably going to be closer to what Quinn was doing, where they just play a lot of different types of fronts, right? And a lot of different types of techniques. So I think the familiarity there will help with some of the guys, the older guys that have been around Parsons and some of these other folks. And then in the back end, I don't think that they're going to be playing a bunch of more complicated coverages. No. I think it's more just like how they're playing them. So I don't know that the learning curve will be very difficult. And again, what they're calling kind of matches up the skill set of the guys that you actually have on the outside specifically.
And last thing on the defense before we move on, and we talked about this a little bit early in the offseason, but I think of all the players on the defense, the one player that'll benefit the most from Matt Eberflus is Osa Odighizuwa. I think this is a perfect scheme for Osa Odighizuwa. The Cowboys clearly think he's an ascending player. They gave him a boatload of money this offseason. If you get Osa, who's already playing at, let's say, a near Pro Bowl level, he takes that next step and he's one of the top 4 or 5 defensive tackles in the NFC, and you pair him with Micah. Bland kind of helps you out at the slot corner spot. I think this defense can go to a whole nother level. We've been fans of Osa Odighizuwa for a long time now. I wouldn't be surprised if in year 5, this is when he really takes off. Defensive tackle is historically a position that takes these guys a while before they reach their ceiling. I kind of think it happens this year.
Yeah, and for Osa, he's kind of approached it, or his learning curve has kind of been approached backwards, right? Like he came in the league pretty much a ready-made pass rushing defensive tackle, as close as you're going to get to one, right? But running against the run, he was undersized. I mean, he's strong and he has incredible leverage because of his wrestling background, but it's still a lot of technique, and it's a difficult thing at 280 pounds, even with great technique. Fast forward to today, where he's grown, he's a bigger player, he's a stronger player, he's matured quite a bit. He's still a good pass rusher, but you're hoping that in this new system, the techniques that you're using, he takes a step as a run defender a little bit, and maybe that's just as simple as using him in a more correct way instead of having him just try to penetrate and get to the ball carrier on your way to the quarter.
Well, I even look at someone like Gervon Dexter, who the Bears had last year, who is a very raw pass rusher from Florida. He was 3rd in the NFL in quarterback hits, and I think Osa is a much better player. This scheme is just going to allow him to get upfield, get to the quarterback. So I'm anticipating a breakout season from Osa. You get Micah Parsons in the prime of his career. That's how this defense becomes a top 10 unit in 2025. All right, let's go to another bold prediction on offense. I'm going to tell you who the Cowboys' leading rusher will be in 2025 next. This episode is brought to you by Monarch Money. Have you ever checked your bank account and wondered, where did all my money go between dining out, online shopping, and entertainment? It's easy to lose track, but that's where Monarch Money comes in, your personal CFO, giving you full visibility and control over your finances. Monarch Money isn't just a budgeting app. It's a complete financial command center. You can track all of your accounts, all of your investments, and your spending in one place, so you can stop managing your money and start building your wealth. My family started using Monarch Money several months ago, and we realized how much money we were wasting on food delivery, online shopping, coffee runs, football cards, you name it, we were doing it. But now we've taken control of our finances, and you can too with Monarch Money. Use code LOCKEDONNFL at monarchmoney.com for 50% off your first year. That is monarchmoney.com, code LOCKEDONNFL for half off your first year. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. We are giving you 3 bold predictions ahead of the 2025 season. Elena and I got one for you. Here's my biggest bold prediction. The Dallas Cowboys leading rusher for the 2025 season is not on their roster. I just have a hard time believing that it's going to be Javonte Williams and Miles Sanders carrying the rock. I think it's going to be one of them as part of the committee. I've always said this all along. I don't think they're going to carry 2 veteran running backs. I think it's going to be, like, say, Miles Sanders, Jaden Blue in a part-time role, and some other younger player. Whether they get that guy in free agency, between now and week 1, whether they go out and trade for somebody, I just think they're going to add a better running back at some point.
You understand that Hunter Lipke is on the roster already, right, Marcus?
Who?
He's, Hunter Lipke. He's, unbelievable. Unbelievable. Yeah, no, I think that's not I think bold, but realistic bold, right? Like I do think that with Williams and Sanders right now, they're providing a floor to the situation, right? And I think that's kind of the idea. The hope, I think, internally for the Cowboys is, I would assume that the Blue and Maffa take a step to the point where you feel like you make one of the 2 other veteran running backs obsolete. And if they don't, then that's when it's time to kind of go shopping a little bit. But yeah, I mean, look, I think, we started to see some of these, veteran names come up as trade options potentially, not necessarily for the Cowboys, but just names of folks that are unhappy, probably because of the amount of rookie running backs that are coming into the league right now, and they're feeling like they're getting pressed out. I mean, obviously Breece Hall is the one that kind of comes forward to mind immediately. So, there's going to be other guys like that too, that are on teams that had drafted running backs because of this, robust running back class that we talked about all spring. And so I think that there's going to continue to be more and more opportunities if the Cowboys want to try to, flip a late round pick or just be available if one of them gets cut, to kind of scoop up a guy that may upgrade the situation a little bit from where you are. It sounds like, from what we've heard, they are happy with the vets that they've got so far, but that's it's OTAs, and I think there certainly is going to be, it's running back position. There's going to be opportunities to continue to upgrade the position if you're just patient and you want to kind of add somebody a little bit down the road. So I think it's certainly a possibility that not only is the leading rusher not on this team, but maybe somebody who could be a focus of this offense by midseason that we don't even know is on the roster yet.
I just won't be surprised if the Cowboys play the comp game the comp pick game a little bit. Like, for example, they traded a 3rd and 5th for George Pickens, and the hope is that either you re-sign him or he has, we'll talk about his season next, but a good season and you recoup a pick. What if you traded, let's say, a 4th round pick for a running back on an expiring deal? You name the running back, whether it's Breece Hall, maybe it's Kenneth Walker in Seattle.
That's another
they
one.
Drafted Zach Charbonnet in round 2 a couple of years ago. They grabbed Damian Martinez, or someone like Damian Pierce with the Texans. They just signed Nick Chubb. They have Joe Mixon. Pierce was awesome during his rookie year. Maybe you flip a 6th round pick for Pierce, you play him for a year, and you get a 5th rounder back next year in a comp pick. I just won't be surprised if the Cowboys do something like that. And maybe they're waiting out a certain situation. Maybe it's Walker. Maybe it's Hall. Maybe it's Pierce. Maybe it's Tyler Algier. I don't know the name exactly. I think the Cowboys are going to have a good running game this year. I just don't know who it's going to be yet.
It's interesting because it does feel like the Cowboys in general are listening to their analytics department when it comes to running the football, right? Like building the running game at the offensive line, not valuing the average running back necessarily as much, and realize that you can kind of get that sort of play cheaply. It would make sense to have a more analytic solution to the problem as well, right? To get a short-term rental that you could eventually flip for a higher asset than what you paid for. That would be a very analytical approach. An analytical approach to trading in general is that way. So I agree. I think that certainly is a possibility. And again, the best part about this is because the positions that the Cowboys are waiting on are running back, as we talked about in the previous segment, defensive tackle. Those are the 2 positions in which you can afford to be patient, because those guys are kind of constantly having those buckets are constantly filled with veteran, playable level guys who you can sign for cheap contracts and plug right in.
And I'll give you a couple other names that are out there. Ramondre Stevenson from the Patriots. Now, remember, this is a whole new front office, new coaching staff. They drafted Travion Henderson in round 2. I would assume the plan is to play Stevenson and Henderson together, but I wouldn't be surprised if Stevenson is somebody that gets traded. So he's somebody that I'm keeping an eye on. Maybe you go to Denver. Denver has RJ Harvey, who they drafted in the 2nd round. They just signed J.K. Dobbins. They have Jaleel McLaughlin. We kind of liked Audric Estime.
Audric Estime, I was going to say.
Yeah, at this time last year. And if you want a guy that could be like the between the tackle grinder and you're pairing him with Miles Sanders and Jaden Blue, I wouldn't be surprised if you get Estime for a late round pick and he comes in and he has success. So just I got to believe that at some point the Cowboys are going to make a running back move this offseason. Maybe it's in July, maybe it's in August. We'll see.
Yeah, I mean, like we said this whole time, there's still plenty of time to kind of continue to upgrade this position. You know, they'll take a look at the guys they like. They clearly have a preference for their rookies to take these jobs. But if that doesn't quite happen on the timeline of the beginning of the regular season, or if they feel they need to go get more firepower, I wouldn't at all be shocked to go get someone that you feel like maybe an upgrade on the whole position for you, and ends up being running back 1 coming in.
Yeah, we're going to talk about another bold prediction really quickly at the end of the show. But before we do that, little breaking news, Cowboys edition.
Wow.
Cowboys have signed defensive tackle Perion Winfrey, who played in the UFL this year, played at Oklahoma, Boomer Sooner. Real quick thoughts on the Winfrey edition.
Winfrey was different. He was a 3rd round pick, wasn't he? If I'm not mistaken.
3rd or 4th round pick. I just remember him dominating the Senior Bowl. Dominating.
Yeah, real strong. Kind of good athlete for his size. But I think I don't really know exactly what happened.
There was some. I remember. I can fill you in.
Yeah, please fill me in there.
Stuff here. Cleveland moved on relatively quickly.
Man, Cleveland moved on relatively quickly. Oh boy.
Well, and then he bounced around the league a little bit, and then he went to the UFL and played really well.
UFL, yeah.
You're seeing more of these guys get chances. Damon Arnett, who had his problems with the laws. I just saw that he got signed by the Texans on Wednesday. So you're seeing more of these teams kind of take shots on these guys that have had problems in the past.
Did he have a visit with the Cowboys before he signed with the? No, because Damon was famous for lying about his visit with the Cowboys. No, Winfrey was, again, all that stuff that happened. But in the UFL last year, he was one of the best players, one of the best defenders in the UFL. The Cowboys have had a lot of history in getting these guys. The reason I wasn't surprised is because it sounded like this was something that was going to happen. They were looking at UFL guys, and he was one of the guys that was the top guys available. So it obviously is a great fit for the Cowboys' need, and it's a great example of what we just talked about, right? These guys are available if you can go out there and find them if you need them. So,
all right, let's discuss if the Cowboys can have 2 1,000-yard receivers this season. We'll get to that next. Welcome back to the Locked On Cowboys podcast. We'd like to thank you for making us your first listen of the day. For your second listen, check out the Locked On NFL Scouting Show. As training camps get closer, we're only a month away, and moves are being made. Host Kyle Krabs and Joe Marino will make you the most informed NFL fan this offseason. Find Locked On NFL Scouting on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. All right, Landon, let's talk about George Pickens. What are your predictions for him this season?
So I'm predicting that George Pickens has 1,000-yard receiving and is the second 1,000-yard receiver outside of obviously CeeDee for the Cowboys this year. I don't know how bold a prediction this is, because it was more just an exercise in like trying to triangulate his production and where wide receiver 2s have historically been with the Cowboys and that sort of thing. But this is what I came up with. George averages about 2.25 per route run, right? And the Cowboys wide receiver 2 in the last 3 to 4 years has averaged somewhere from 400 to 500 routes per season. So I think he's going to get somewhere probably. He's normally getting north of 20% of target share with when he was with Pittsburgh, because he's basically the de facto wide receiver 1 for most of those situations. And I think that he's probably going to get somewhere, looking at the Cowboys numbers, somewhere closer to like the 15%, 16% target share. So I think that all kind of puts him in striking distance. Like he's all of that kind of adds up to hovering right around 1,000 yards. And I think that, with the added attention being drawn away from CeeDee, he's going to maybe even increase a little bit his yards per reception. So I'm going to predict that he does make it over 1,000 yards, even with the Cowboys focusing on running the football a little bit more efficiently, and with CeeDee Lamb. I just think that there's going to be a lot of opportunity for Pickens, if he stays healthy, to run a bunch of routes and get a bunch of yards.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised at all. Pickens is somebody that doesn't need a lot of targets to be effective and efficient. And I just think he's going to see so much one-on-one coverage down the field where he could average 16, 17 yards a catch. And maybe he gets 4 catches a game, and that's how he gets to 1,000 yards. But I think this passing offense is going to kind of run just through CeeDee and Pickens. Ferguson will be kind of the chain mover, and it's going to be those guys. I don't expect Jalen Tolbert to be more than 400 to 600 yards. And I think this offense is going to have to score a lot of points early in the year. And I think that's the thing. Like, they're going to get into a lot of these shootouts as the defense kind of works up to being what we hope to be, or what we're predicting to be, a top 10 unit. And in a division, in a conference that scores a lot of points, it would not shock me at all if Pickens gets to 1,000 yards.
Well, and I'll go somewhere else too, and I'm going to go ahead and cheat and add in my actual other cut for bold prediction. I think the Cowboys are going to use twice as much 12 personnel, and I think that means that Tolbert isn't going to get nearly as many opportunities as wide receiver 3 as a normal wide receiver 3 has these last few years, because we'll be playing more tight ends. But I also think that that's going to help promote the yards per catch in just because of the way it's going to affect coverages. This is the way that they're going to be playing Pickens. He's going to get more opportunities for bigger and more plays against lesser competition, because now he's going against cornerback 2. So yeah, I think that there's a good chance that the Cowboys operate with maybe less wide receivers on the field, but the result of that actually being that they end up, with more yards per reception, just because of the way that defenses are ended up having to play them.
Do you think we're going to see more play action this year? Because I think if we see more play action, that's where I think Pickens could be really valuable. And maybe we see more 12 personnel play action because they have, some young offensive linemen, Tyler Guyton going into year 2, Tyler Booker in year 1, Cooper Beebe in year 2. Maybe more play action can help this young offensive line. That's how I think we see a vertical passing attack again.
Yeah, and I think that's it. I mean, I think play action and then some of the condensed formation stuff will allow these guys to help get open early. So you're not having to put Dak into long, 7-step drops in order to wait for guys to find their ways to get open. So I think that they're going to find ways to better marry the run and the pass, and not just kind of lip service that situation. And I think that's one of the things that Clayton Adams specifically was brought in here to do, was to help make sure that the running game is not only efficient, but it's part of the passing attack as well.
So I've got a wide receiver prediction that I want to send out to you and see your thoughts.
Yeah.
I think CeeDee Lamb is going to lead the NFL in receiving yards this year. And maybe Pickens gets to 1,000 yards anyways, but I actually think Pickens is going to help CeeDee Lamb more than CeeDee Lamb was going to help Pickens, because last year you just had those safeties crowding the box all the time, and it really limited some of the big plays that CeeDee could make over the middle of the field. But now that you have Pickens, I just think you're going to see more of cover 2, and that's just going to open up the middle of the field for CeeDee Lamb. I think CeeDee is obviously the guy that Dak trusts the most. We've seen over the last 2 years, 3 years, when those guys are healthy, CeeDee is averaging 100 yards a game. I wouldn't be surprised with CeeDee going into his age 26 season, if this isn't just the best year we see from him, if he gets to 1,600 yards, 1,700 yards, and that's enough to lead the league.
Yeah, there's tons of different ways this can go, and that's certainly one of them, right? Where Pickens is just such a draw that the teams are having to account for, or maybe let's say that Pickens has a lot of early success, and teams immediately just decide, nope, we're not allowing that to happen. We'd rather die by 1,000 cuts with CeeDee Lamb than be killed quickly by George Pickens. And that would promote your situation, right? Where they would just feed CeeDee underneath. Obviously, he would break several of those for bigger plays. He would also get his own targets down the field as well. And just, the natural, thought that Dak is going to focus on CeeDee Lamb and that, ultimately they could say what they want and CeeDee can be kind and about all this, but CeeDee Lamb is going to be the focus of this passing game. He's one of the best players in the NFL. So I think that, they'll definitely get a face full of Pickens. Defenses are going to be sick of seeing him run down the field. Defenses are going to be sick of seeing him pretend to run down the field and then stop instantly and getting some stop routes. But it's actually going to be CeeDee more than Pickens, I think, that will be moved around formations, put in advantageous positions, the focus of the passing attack week to week for the Cowboys.
It's just that these guys have been playing together for so long. We're going into year 6 of them together. The only wide receiver quarterback pairing that I think has been together longer would be Joe Burrow and Jamar Chase, where they played together at LSU. I mean, that's probably the only one. It's just pretty rare to have that in today's NFL. So those guys just know each other so well. He's locked into getting double-digit targets every single week. Can he average 14, 15 yards per catch? Because if he does, I think 1,600 yards is very attainable. That's all.
Yeah, and especially, again, this year he gets a full offseason. Hopefully he has a little bit better health than he did last year as well, simply because he won't be taking as many hits because he won't be the only guy catching the football. I think all these things are going to help CeeDee have a much better season than maybe he's had the last few seasons.
All right, that is it for today's show. We'd like to thank you for making Locked On Cowboys your first listen every single day. On tomorrow's show, we're going to talk about the Cowboys' new defensive tackle, Perion Winfrey, which we just learned about today, and a new corner that the Cowboys just signed. That's a teaser for Friday's show. So make sure you guys are tuned in for that. Follow Landon on Twitter at McCoolBCB. I'm at Marcus_Mosher. Check out the podcast wherever you get your podcasts. We are free and available on all platforms, and we will see you right back here on Friday.